get started. Okay, for today, I'm going to check on to what are the APIs, what do they look like, and why are they used, what do they do, and how do they do it. Hopefully, maybe we can do a demo of what goes on to maybe breaching into the API security. Okay, well, as you all know, an API acts as a link between two applications. We can call it as a mediator because it's trying to connect to bridge between the client and the server. So as seen over here, said it's a translator between the two devices, and here you can see it's the client and the server. Usually, when you connect, when you create your application, you have the client side and the server side. So the client side receives the data from the server, and so here to have the two communication, an API acts as the breakthrough inside between here. You can see even in other maybe you're having a web app communicating with the server, you have the cloud, IoT devices, mobile apps, or even toys for those who love the games. That's the connection that comes up between. For you to communicate between the server, you have to have an API. Here it says it's also a simple illustration how the API communicates. It sounds like there's a computer or media set in between. So, well, how does API works? This is generated by done through exposing a set
Okay,
of functions.
Roy,
Yep.
Roy, sorry to interrupt you. Maybe you can have the slides on presentation mode so that they can be a bit more clearer,
Okay, sure.
like on full screen mode. Yeah. Thank you.
That's better. Is
Yeah,
it okay now?
yeah, that works. Yeah,
Yeah.
that works. Thank you.
So as I was saying before, API works whereby you have a set of functions or maybe let's call them protocols, which are being used by other applications. A good example is like, for instance, here we're using Zoom, whereby we are pulling data from the backend. It's going to their server and then comes back over here. So that's how generally it works through a mediator now. Okay, so when you want to maybe connect to an API, you have to send a request to the API provider, and then which grants you or denies you access. And basically, the request comes in form of maybe JSON or XML, and these are basically the CRUD operations that happens at the create, API, push, put, get, all those. Okay, yeah, so that's a general, you just have to maybe request and then receive data back. And then, so that comes back to our point. When you create API, you have to expose them as endpoints so that they can be used. So what is an endpoint? This will work generally as the link now. When you try to connect the two, the endpoint will now be accessing the data over there and giving back it to you. This forms why API security is crucial because the data is transferred between the two. And considering like for organization, you generally term it as a business logic, whereby when an API gets compromised or exposed, maybe personal data could be shared, financial information, or any other sensitive information. So having a secure endpoints will make your system look more secure. Okay, like well, APIs endpoints are there to help in updating records or creating new. Here's a sample of an endpoint. How you find you have the API, the shield endpoint, and then gives access to the users, and then you have the first user is the ID now. Maybe you can have user ID 1, 2, 3, depending on the number of users that you have in your system. Yeah, the parameter says the user ID, and the request will be given either in JSON or XML. This depends on how you've set your output in the Postman. Maybe whether using Postman, Swagger, the Karate, or maybe the JMeter. It will depend on you on which output you want your format in. Yeah. So when you're making requests, there are generally four methods. You have the get is whereby you're going to retrieve data from an API, such as maybe a list of records, or maybe you get maybe a simple data. Then to post is whereby you want to create new records. Maybe that user does not exist in the server, and you have to create. And then put is generally updating the data. So you can choose to either patch or put, and then there's also the last one to delete. This generally, to me, I see it as the normal CRUD operations. I don't see any difference. So I prefer it as that. Well, to the API now, we want to know the common vulnerabilities that are over there. The first one, we have the Bola. This is one of the most common one that happens, and maybe in schools you've seen people trying to access to other students' marks or portal and see what grade are they having. So this mostly what goes on. So with Bola, you tend to expose the endpoints that can handle the object identifiers, and basically you check whether a function can work when it's being maybe mishandled. Yeah, like give an example before. You're trying to use the student way, and so with Bola is whereby you find like in APIs they actually expose the endpoints like object identifiers, and so any function that accepts a user input and uses it to access a data source can create something called a level access control issue, whereby this can widen an attack surface. So when you're doing this, you should ensure that you carry out object level authorizations to all these functions to avoid exposing them. Okay, and the second one, have the broken user authentication. This generally like trying to, I can call it in a layman's language. Is like you expect input from the clients, and this happens in a scenario whereby you maybe want your system to register users, but you haven't taken keen or consideration to how many users can the system handle at once. So what happens when maybe there are a lot of can I call it flooding to the system? This would create a kind of security issue, which may be serious because this data needs to be filtered at the server side, and then the relevant information given back to the client. Well, if that does not, you don't take consideration of what happens to this system, you end up maybe risking endpoints, and maybe you find some system telling you you are currently down, or maybe exposing a funny output to the screen, which might lead to vulnerability. Okay. The next thing might be the lack of resources and also limiting. Like before I said, might have the issue of not checking onto the number of users or maybe the resources that can be handled in a system. Then here comes the other issue where you have limited to a certain number, but the number that's being left, it get overloaded to a point. So you find like if you not provide some restrictions, you end up messing because someone might take it as a weakness. This because APIs don't often have a restriction to the size of resource that the client can request. You might request even a million number of users. For instance, you can check onto the free APIs, like the Typicode and the random API. They don't have any limitation to the number of requests that you're making. So this is one thing that can end up having an issue to the performance of the API server. For instance, when one conducts a DOS, the denial of service, this goes on to exposing some of the authentications and maybe giving a room for one to conduct brute force. And when you conduct that, whenever the endpoint is weak, you're going to expose each and everything that's going there. Well, Another issue comes up is the BFLA. This is the broken function level authorization. It comes from a complex control policy whereby group are, you find whenever you're going to have restriction based on the number of people that are going to enter into a system, they don't have to, let me see the way to phrase it better. You're having access based on levels. You have maybe the admin level, staff level, and then the users level. So you find that if you have a weak system that is not going to control all these, you might end up having also a level access control issue, and hence a wide session of attack. Then you have the mass assignment. This is generally based on how you're going to align your data. If you don't have a better way of filtering your data and ensuring like you have a property filtering, you'll end up risking your users. So this generally results from whereby you bind client's data to a data model which does not filter. And when someone tries to modify an input in another maybe another way which is different, for instance, if you're exposing an output to be maybe XML and then someone changes to JSON, it still outputs the data. So this gives the users a chance to explore the endpoints and change. For instance, you find there's a like then for neighbors, I had a chance to play with it after the exposure on the Twitter, and I found that whenever I change the user from the endpoints from users and change to what is it? They had stores and also users. When you change to stores, you can still access the items that are available in the store. So fine, if you're not keen, you end up messing up. And also we have something else like security misconfigurations. This comes up when you have maybe poor settings or configurations in your when you're documenting your application. This generally occurs maybe when you're having your headers mostly in a system, and it's common to the PHP systems. You find maybe you do not configure something better, and hence it's going to affect the system. And this one might lead to let's call them the ad hoc or incomplete configurations, because when one does not or leaks sensitive information that one can be able to use, you end up risking. Then there's another one, the common issue. We have the injection. I think as we are familiar with the SQL injection, whereby JetPoint can give a chance one to give queries. So this one gives attacker a chance to send some data to the server, and hence tricking maybe you can trick maybe the server or the interpreter to execute some of the commands which are not necessary. Remember, when much of the work that goes in the backend is, I can say it's the database that works a lot, considering when you give an input, it has to be pushed and also executed. So whenever a very funny command is sent, it ends up querying the info and returning it to the hacker or the attacker, which ends up in giving authorized access to the information. Well, then have the issue of improper asset management. It's taken as one of the careers one need to take. Maybe you see companies are hiring an IT asset manager. So in your work you're meant to check onto the endpoints, document them, and ensure like they are not exposed. Whenever you have a NIPE that has been updated, you ensure it's documented and check on the risk that might come arise from improper configurations. When you compare this to the traditional way of securing web applications, today's APIs are kind of they're more secure. That's the REST API mostly and the GraphQL. So when you have the API that are not migrated, and you leave maybe you're migrating a system from one version to another, and for instance, you have also altered some of the backend endpoints. If you don't have to document this one, and maybe you end up what do you call mismanaging your info, it might land on unsafe hands, hence risking you. Well, then have the other common way of insufficient logging and monitoring. This is whereby you find that you do not provide adequate measures when someone is going to log into a system, and hence you can lead to lack of incident response integration, and hence breaching data. This is one of the I can call it one of the most crucial, vital endpoints, considering when one is able to maneuver the log or monitor. Let me call the logging endpoint. He can then be able to know what's in your system, because for most endpoints, when you're able to go inside, you can see what's available and the items that are already in your system. So whenever you have a weak log endpoint, to find yourself being on the, what do we call it? You find yourself on the verge of attack. And so those are the most common 10 ways of whereby you find yourself risking your system. Well, there comes the other one, whereby you need to, we are going to check now. You have seen of the some of the vulnerabilities that our endpoints are having access to. And so how can we secure this system? I tried to come up with this simple way. I don't know whether it makes sense. Whereby you try to, but this goes on to the normal way of the cybersecurity. You first began by identifying the vulnerability that's in the system. So I feel like, just like the way people feel there's the SDLC cycle, it's good to have the API development cycle. Most of the people feel like API is not a crucial thing, and they don't even tend to check whether there's any typo or any issue, hence leaking them. So whenever you have a system, an organization where you have a large number of APIs, if they are not taken care of and someone who is handling them, maybe the asset manager is not taking good time to document them, ensure they are okay, and testing them, you end up not doing a better work. So you need first to ensure you identify the vulnerabilities in your API, and then the second way goes up to having or working on the authentication. So we have this tool called Auth. It's one of the common ways used to secure your systems, especially the backend, and mostly works on when you're using token. So this one allows that party services to gain an access to information and without exposing the credential. And like whereby one used to log into a system, find /login and then one. This one gives a token which expires within a certain range of time. So you need to ensure you use some of the security measures, like you can leverage your authentications, and also I find it's good to encrypt your data. Okay, most of the data that you find in a system, it's being managed by an API, and this most happens to the personal identifying information or maybe other sensitive data, which you find organization need to be compliant to the standards to ensure it's safe. When you're not implementing enough security or encrypting their data, you might end up compromising the APIs and hence linking them to the dark web, whereby people can play along with it. So it's better to ensure you encrypt and provide signatures that will ensure that any unauthorized user can be able to decrypt it, and if they're not authorized, they cannot decrypt or maybe modify their data provided by the API. And also, it's good to have a throttling or maybe a rate limiting. This whereby there's a certain number of which request can be made. This is a good measure to ensure that you do not fall victim of the denial of service attack, because these people try to bomb into several requests at once. And so if you have a certain number of limit, maybe it's not go beyond 100 or maybe 50, you not fall prey, because at a certain limit, it will have to pause and wait for the thread that is remaining to complete before it can take more other requests. So setting a limit on the method and frequency of API calls to prevent the DOS helps to create a great protection, maybe against any peak traffic that can arise. Well, this I feel can also help to boost your performance and also security at a certain time, because it will have a good balance limiting. Then you can have the normal way of maybe meshing. Yeah, you can try to use a service mesh, since this one it's a like kind of different layers of management and control, whereby the routing request goes from one service to the next, and this can be a best measure because it helps to optimize and ensure that two systems are working interconnected. For instance, authentication, and then from authentication you're going to the home or the dashboard, or where you're going to next. And also, you can also try to adopt a zero trust philosophy, whereby when one is not required to access, you don't have access. This one works whereby one need to have an authentication to access the endpoints. Might be a bit complex and maybe expensive, but it's crucial. Well, and then you also need to provide testing to your applications API, so that there's no any API that can be vulnerable. Some of the ways you can test the APIs, maybe there are several ways. I'm trying to recall them. I'm not kind of recording them, but oh yeah, this the one you can use. Maybe you can check for maybe if there's a tampering of a parameter in the API, whereby you find if you tamper, maybe your parameters, you have maybe exe, what if I change it to another letter, will it change? You can also test for command injections. This is whereby you find, I don't know that you guys have ever tried. You access an endpoint, and then at the end you maybe try to have any command line, maybe let's say reboot or restart, and see what the effect it would. So you need to ensure like you check out these, how to happen if one inputs such commands. And also you can try to check out to fuzzing, or maybe the API input. What would happen if you try to change the input? To most that might not make kind of sense, because they feel the data is coming from the database. But if you don't become keen, you might end up affecting them. And also you need to check out the different ways of handling the HTTP methods. So since they are mostly on the back end, you can use the Postman, check if the headers are okay, check if the four common ways, I don't know if there are 4 or 5, they are working. And what about if you try to alter it? Like the one for parsing is whereby you try to check whether an API can return an error on whether the input is correct or no or wrong. So you can be able to check all these errors just from having an handled HTTP method or hypertext protocol methods. When you find your API is accepting strings and maybe a SQL queries does not accept that, you can maybe work on that. Don't know whether, let me check my, okay, that's what I prepared for today. Maybe I can check if we can manage to have try maybe one, maybe the BFLA one. Let me check if we can have a API. Maybe you can ask any question on any part that you didn't get. The check an API that you can use.
Okay. Is there any questions? Maybe you can just unmute, or you can write it in the chat, and I'll be happy to read that aloud. Okay, there's a question from Juma. Juma, I don't know if you're able to unmute. Maybe you can just do that. Okay. Juma, I can see your hand is raised. So maybe you can just write that in the chat, or you can unmute. Or I don't know if your hand was raised by mistake. So anyone else with a question or comments? Just have that in the chat. And then we can end the session. Okay. Any question? So Roy, maybe you can share your social media handles so that people. Okay.
Oh, that's you can check. Boss saying you cannot be able to unmute.
Okay. Okay. I think you can now unmute. I think you're Juma.
Okay. Okay. Hello, everyone.
Yeah. Hi.
Okay. To me, I have one or two questions to the moderator, Roy. First and foremost, like the session was good. I really liked it. It was really informative. But I have one or two questions. First question was like, maybe I want to build this API. How will I start? Maybe I want to link maybe two websites. How will I make this work? Like, where am I gonna start? What is my basis? Yeah. Then two, if build that website, maybe I want to link maybe just maybe say Telegram to a given website. Maybe I want to depict something from Telegram and paste it on a given website, then takes it back to that Telegram. So how am I gonna do this? Like, how will I make these things communicate? Like, I don't like, how will I start building? Please assist me there.
Okay, I did get a question. Okay, are you trying like to understand how are you going to expose your endpoints so that you can receive them from the front end, or are you talking about integration? Because your question contradicted between integration and maybe expressing endpoints to be able to read them from the front end. And maybe Nancy didn't get the question clear.
Maybe you can just repeat the question. Juma, kindly. Yeah.
Okay. Let me repeat the question. Okay, first you said that an API is a link between like two, like an intermediary, is it?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, like now I want to like intermediary, I want to make like okay, like it's just like an integration kind of a thing because it acts like in between. Maybe I want to take a link, maybe from Telegram, maybe, or let me take something from Telegram, then paste it on a given clipboard, then they picked information from that link back to back to Telegram. Is that possible? Like, how am I gonna build it? Because I want an API that does that one automatically for me.
Well, I think there's a Telegram API, so you can just
Okay.
take a, you can just consume it and then define what you want, and then in your code, you just decide where you want to the output to go.
Or like it tells me where to go.
Okay, like I don't know how I'm gonna define it when I dev, because there's a developer question. Are you familiar
Okay.
with APIs?
No, that's why I was asking. I'm not familiar because I didn't understand like just API back and front like an intermediary. Like in the real basis, when I want to build that same API now, I don't know how to go about it. Where am I gonna start? What language am I gonna use? Like how am I going to go about that?
Well, can we, are you meant to answer maybe a question? Nancy, I think you can answer that on a developer side. I don't know. Okay, but I would say like this much of it is happening on the back end and depends on the language you're using. Maybe you can prefer to use TypeScript or Python, the Django one. And for the API, you're just going to build your own APIs. That's actually what happens mostly. So it's all about the data that you're storing in the in the backend you have the database and then your system. So the data that's stored in the database is what it's what mostly you're going to be fetching a lot. So that's how now you're going to create the data link now of the API now that you'll be fetching the data now from the backend, or that's the database. And so to be able to do this is how you're now using this language now to help you query this data directory. And then when you query it, to create the endpoints that cannot be exposed. I think that's a developer question. I mean, trying to answer it on a developer side.
Okay, okay,
Maybe
okay.
someone
But
with a better roadmap for backend, but you can check on roadmap.sh. It has good roadmaps for backend.
okay. Okay. Okay, but what about if I want the front view of it?
Front view of it.
Because I want to be allowed to depict things from the back end of the Telegram.
I didn't get that clearer.
Okay, like in simple terms, like I'm trying to get a link from Telegram, is it?
Yeah.
Then paste on my database.
Mm-hmm.
Then if it finds like maybe I want to find some kind of a link, maybe if that link has that information, then I paste it back on Telegram. I tell them that this is the right link.
Well, I'm not getting a question clearer.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Can you come up again?
Okay, like basically like, okay, like you had said, like an API, like it's the intermediary between maybe two interfaces, like let me say like that. So my
Yeah.
my two interfaces are my database and Telegram,
Mm-hmm.
is it?
Yeah.
So I want to take my link from the front end of like it is on Telegram. Someone has sent me a link. I want to take that link, then search it on my database, Then if it finds that link on my database, sends information or a prompt to Telegram again and say this is the right link.
Well, you just have to write a function whereby you're going to post that data that you have fetched. Because for once when you fetch the data from Telegram, it's going to be stored in your database, and then from your database now you choose whereby you're going to query it and post it where. For instance, in the front end. So in a scenario 2, you'll also choose where you're going to push your data to. Maybe you want to push it back to Telegram. Well, and it's all upon you.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So basically, that's gonna do with Python or JavaScript.
Any language can do. Python can do it. JavaScript, Java, for the backend. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Welcome. Okay, I've shared with you a link to the backend roadmap. Maybe you can check onto that.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome. Tanya had a question.
Sorry, who else had a question? Because I can't see any other hands. Sorry?
I don't know that Tanya is comfortable.
Oh, Mark. Mark, I don't know. Do you have a question? Or can we end the session? Okay. Just a minute. Yeah, I think you're in a position to unmute.
Okay, thank you. I think I just wanted to mention something that Boaz was asking. At that time, I think Roy hadn't answered him, but I think now it's a bit more clearer for Boaz. But I'd also mentioned that technically and theoretically, that is possible for you to be able to fetch a link from Telegram if they have an API to help you access the charts. That is possible if they have that one. But now, if they don't, then it becomes practically impossible for you to do that. So that would be you consuming or integrating your database with their API so that you fetch the data you want, provided Telegram exposes that through the API. So theoretically that is possible, but practically it all depends with the API that Telegram offers. If it offers that functionality, then yes. If it doesn't, then no. But thank you, Roy, for the session.
You're welcome. Yeah, sure. I can see when there's a Telegram has a free API that you can try with it, but mostly it's for the bots.
Okay. Thank you so much, Roy, for making time to take us through today. Thank you also, Mark, Tanu, for your input, and everyone else. Thank you for joining in. I can see we are past time with 2 minutes, but thank you for making time. Thank you for staying through the entire session, and I'll see you next week for the next session. Thank you. Have a lovely night. Keep warm. I think it's raining everywhere. So, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Nataka niwapigie kelele.